Welcome to Homemakers, Southwest England, Zone 8 climate, temperate oceanic on the 13th of November. So it's late autumn, just a month and a half until the turn of the year, and yet the garden is still quite full. And this is thanks in no small measure to no dig, as well as being on it with summer plantings. Like for example here, we've had a nice bed harvested already, quite half of them, of chicory plants which make these amazing radicchios. There's one that weighs around 650 grams, pound and a half, bittersweet leaves which we cut into quarters and then break them to put in salad bags. I sell a lot of salad here, and new growth is not very strong at this time of year, but that's a kind of stored growth which is great in those bags of mixed leaves. And this is all planted without putting on any more compost. So this bed was potatoes, first and second earlies, whereas here we had broccoli. And the broccoli finished in June, and we planted these multi-sown beetroot. These are boltardy. There's the four. And these are nice and big, which will be great for winter. So these are for winter storage. And this is a second planting grown without any, I'm not using any feeds or fertilizers here. So, you know, this is just one application of compost a year is growing the two crops. You're seeing the second crops. If you want to see the first crops actually from this area of ground here, they're in When to Pick, a video we made on the 11th of June. These celeriac went in after spinach. So they were transplanted around the 20th of May. And look at the result. Again, this is one I harvested yesterday. And you can see what they look like once you've taken off the leaves and cut off the amazing roots they have, many, many coming out of the bottom. All of this area is got quite fixed cropping because I'm doing some trials, and one of the trials is into no rotation. The cabbage were grown there for the 6th year in a row, and so are the leeks. So these leeks followed the 6th year of potatoes, and now we're in the 6th year of leeks. And this is what multi-sown leeks look like when you harvest them. That was a clump of only 2, that's why they're a bit bigger. You can see there's quite a range of sizes here, they're not all big. And the nice result though is that there's a lot of leeks, and you don't get a long white shank because they're not planted hugely deep, and that makes it easier also to harvest them with less soil disturbance. That is a variety called Philomene. Well, here we have kale, and this kale followed spinach. We started picking it in August, and we have already picked 27 kilograms. That's nearly 60 pounds of kale from this one bed. So by autumn you can feel you've had great harvest, but there's still a lot to come, like these different kind of chicory here. These are called Treviso type 706 TT, and they will stand even for harvesting as late as Christmas. That's probably when we shall pick them. I'm walking across a bed here, which you can do with no dig. You can walk on your beds if you need to. Here we've actually applied the compost for the coming year already. This is Brussels sprouts, and that was the first compost this bed had had for a whole year. And the Brussels sprouts are a second crop. So they followed carrots, and without applying any more fertility, you get this amazing growth. And brassicas they're normally called hungry plants, but I don't really think of it in that way. They're just a plant, if you like. And I'm looking to keep the ground cropping the whole time. I'm not leaving the ground bare at any stage. That includes perennial crops, like here we have asparagus. And in fact, in the middle, we put the stalks, cut down the stems and put them all along the middle pathway, walk on them a bit, and they've already gone down a lot actually. They'll turn into a kind of straw mulch for the coming year. There's a bed there which looks empty, but actually that already has garlic planted, and we're going to put a compost mulch on top of that later on today. So the soil is always covered by something if it's not a growing crop, it has compost on. Here there was a gap. There was about 6 weeks towards the end of the season when the 2 crops had finished, which was spinach followed by chicory. And I just broadcast mustard. That's white mustard, Synapsis alba, which is never going to get very big, but it's a nice cover. It's adding organic matter. And in fact, we've even been harvesting it for salad because these little shoots make a nice little addition to the salad bags. So it's a bit of a bonus in every way, actually. Very easy to grow. Lovely thing with no-dig is how you have very few weeds, so all of this cropping becomes so much easier. And that is helped also by the fertility we're bringing in, like wood chips here. This pile is 2 months old. It was brought here by a tree surgeon then in late September, and it's still just tepid warm. So in 2 months it's gone from being fresh chips to that, which I'm very happy to see. And you could put that on your paths. We won't need it for a while, so we'll let it get a bit older. You can also add it to compost heaps. So we're adding a bit of wood chip to make compost, and that's the main source of fertility here. This is homemade compost here, which has been there now for, well, it's been here for a month. It's when we run out of space in the compost bays, and that is what we're actually using now. It's just under a year old compost, and we have here actually some wood chip, which is just under a year old as well. And you can see the difference when the wood chip has started to break down, almost turning into compost, but not quite. This we're putting either on paths or chopping it up with a lawnmower. Actually, it goes something like that. That's a bit that came out the edge of the lawnmower, I think. And that goes in the compost heaps. So the compost is being made in the bays that we're walking towards now. And you'll see, first of all, the newest heap. So that's the heap we've created just in the last 3 weeks. And it's a mix of green and browns. The green is mainly waste from the garden, some lawn mowings. This heap we finished 3 weeks ago, so those amazing fungi have suddenly appeared as it's cooling down a bit. It's still pretty warm, that one. Then there's an empty bay, which is where we shall turn the newest heap into when it's about another month older. Then there's a heap of compost which is 3 months old, so that's 3 months old compost, looking pretty nice, and is still pretty warm actually. Then we have 4-month-old compost and 6-month-old compost. So that's the year of composting all in a couple of minutes for you. They give you an idea. So these heaps are ready to go if we need them, but we won't need them actually for a little while. The main garden here is about 1/10 of an acre. The whole area I'm cropping is 1/4 of an acre. And, sorry, this is 1/5. And that was about 250 square meters over there that we've looked at. But if you think this is 1/4 of an acre altogether of homemakers beds, and from that we're selling over £20,000 worth of vegetables a year. It's very intensive, partly thanks to this second cropping or more. I mean, this spinach actually is the 4th vegetable which has been in this bed this year. First it was sprouting broccoli in April that was sown the previous year, then it was peas for shoots, then it was lettuce, and now it's spinach. So the spinach went in between lettuce, so we're doing quite a bit of interplanting, and that spinach, that bed has not had any fertility added to it since the broccoli were growing last in November, so for over a year actually. And look at the abundance of the spinach. And this coriander as well, looking really nice. That should survive the winter and go into spring following. As will these spring onions. So these were sown right at the end of August, transplanted here a couple of weeks after that, mid-September. And the idea is they stay small through the winter and then really start to swell when the days lengthen in March. From equinox to the end of May, lovely onions. We'll just selectively pull them. I'll point out here some weeds actually, because we haven't seen many weeds yet. This is like a thistle from homemade compost. You can see they pull out very easily. Winter parsley, I don't really want that there. Dandelion, more grass. Grass is very common here. That's a hand weeding job, and that's how we do weeding at this time of year. And it doesn't take long because there aren't many. That is a few weed seeds from homemade compost. But mostly you can see how clean the beds are with very little weeding. We spend, on average, around 10 minutes a week here weeding. you know, literally that little. So that saves a huge amount of time. We can really concentrate on the cropping. And look at these lovely carrots. You can also see here the whiteness in the soil in places. I mean, look at this, incredible. Where it's breakdown caused by. See what happens here. Actually, I think this one might have forked a bit. No, it's even split a bit. These are oxella. Well, that's a more typical one, and good for winter storage. This one is not so typical. There's still good carrot there. It's just split a bit, as you can see. So these carrots were sown quite late, really, 20th of June, following cabbage. And again, no extra fertility or anything. And they spent most of their life under a mesh cover, and that helps to keep the carrot root fly off, which can be a real problem here, actually. And there is some root fly in there, but not too much, so I'm confident they will store pretty well through the winter. Whereas the parsnips here, we'll just leave in the ground, and they store through the winter like that, and we harvest as and when we need them. The broccoli here is, I sow it later than often recommended on seed packets, so this was sown mid-June and we transplanted it very early July, 2nd of July, and it had mesh over to keep the insects off. This will crop in April. They're beautiful heads of purple broccoli, and just beyond it you can see some nice pak choy as well. There are quite a lot of brassicas in this corner, and we're harvesting that at the moment for selling as large leaves, actually, for cooking. They're not perfect, they got some flea beetle damage, but they're pretty nice to eat at this time of year. This is the mesh I use to keep insects off brassicas as far as possible. It doubles up in winter for keeping off the pigeons and rabbits as well. We don't have many rabbits here, but sometimes the rabbits can find a planting and do a lot of damage very quickly. So just to be on the safe side, I'll keep these on, and the pigeons also, I just know that they're protected then, and they will crop, all being well, in April. Here we picked yesterday, so that's why this bed looks rather empty. We've been taking off the outer leaves, and that is how we harvest the salad here. We don't use knives, we just keep removing outer leaves. We've been picking this bed every week. Considering it's now the middle of November, that's pretty good going, reflecting the fact that the weather's been very unusually warm for the time of year. And likewise, their leeks are still growing, looking really healthy, I must say. And this is second planting after potatoes. So this bed was potatoes already, 54 kilos of potatoes there. And you can see that one in a video we made that we'll release at some point this winter, which is interesting also because that's a new bed. It's less than a year old. This last year, that was just grass, and then it had cardboard on top. So it started like this, grass and weeds, including bindweed, a bit of couch grass, not too much. And you can see the start point of the process here, where just 2 weeks ago, we laid cardboard on the pasture grass and weeds. And so in 2 weeks, you can see that's how much you're basically depriving the grass and weeds, whatever's here, basically, of light. And there's a slug. You get quite a few slugs in the first year of doing this, which, generally speaking, I find don't actually give too much problem, but it's something to be aware of. And we put a first layer of compost on here, just to keep the cardboard down mainly, but that's not the finished result yet. The final layer will be quite a bit higher. It can be as much as 6 inches, which quite quickly settles to less of compost, and that's creating a new bed, no dig. That's how most of what you see here started out, but the ongoing amount of compost you need is much less. We're putting on 2 centimetres, even less than an inch actually now, every year for these amazing results. Although here in the polytunnel I do put on a bit more because of this intensity of cropping undercover. So this tunnel, just 4 weeks ago, this had tomatoes, cucumbers, basil, melons, summer crops. Actually 5 weeks. Yeah, it was 5 weeks ago. And then we cleared it pretty quickly and popped these plants in. So these plants have been in the ground between 4 and 5 weeks as module raised transplants. And there's a lovely mixture of all the things you can grow in this climate through the winter. So these are for cropping all through the winter, not just 1 or 2 harvests. And we're starting next week Some of these lovely mustards are coming ready. Different frilly ones, red lace and green frills. And they're all to go in the mix that I sell. And then you get a lovely balance when you add the mustards to the lettuce, for example. There's lettuce and a bit of endive here. And the lettuce is my favourite winter variety, which is Grenoble Red. And I've found over the years that Grenoble Red is incredibly hardy to the level of cold we have here, which is not huge. It goes down to maybe -6 centigrade, 21 Fahrenheit on average. But also it's slightly resistant to slugs, and it doesn't get too much mildew, and we can keep picking it, the outer leaves, and it just keeps on cropping. This would even crop until June if I didn't need the space. It can be 9 months old by the time you actually finish. I'll just mention in passing a little trial we're doing there with a water vase in the ground. So far I'm not too taken with it, but we'll see. Then between the lettuce you can also see, just coming up now, garlic. So I always grow a few garlic in here amongst the salad. It doesn't take any extra space. And then one or two other things I'll mention, like different kind of endive there, and beautiful winter herb, which is chervil. That's incredibly hardy, actually. You can grow that outside too. We've got some outdoors. More mustards, and then pea shoots over there. So therefore, all being well, they survive. They're not quite so hardy as broad beans, but we'll see. And some salad rocket. So that's winter in the polytunnel. And even outside there, I mean, like, we've got some landcress growing along the side edge, which that's totally hardy. As long as you don't get pigeons on it, that's a banker for the winter. Well, here we have a bed which is falling apart. And this is one of the reasons generally I don't recommend wooden sides for beds. This has been like a specimen bed. It was started like 5 years ago, just as an example of how to make and fill a bed. And this wood is 5 years old. It is actually treated timber from the builder's yard, softwood, so it should really have lasted better than this, I think. But look at the decay that's happening now. In fact, we're going to take these sides off very shortly, and we'll probably film it so that you can see what happens, how to dismantle a bed. And what we'll need to do is run some cardboard along the side to kill the grass a bit here through light deprivation, and that will just make a little path around the bed and stop the grass spreading into the actual bed itself. You can see the cropping in one bed like this in a video we posted just a year ago. This is the small garden, which has been fantastic again, as it always is. So these again are second plantings, and I'll just mention one or two in particular. Like, here is some sweet potato which we harvested this morning, and that was one plant there, and that's all that it yielded. There have been 3 plants here, and this one gave 1.8 kilos. That was on the video again, the most recent small garden video. That one gave about 3/4 of a kilo, and that one 1/4 of a kilo. So a little bit variable. And compared to the amount of food you get from more traditional plantings like the Swedes there, and that's a second planting after carrots. And there's even the third planting there. I put some compost around, and then lamb's lettuce has gone in between the Swedes. And again, because of the very low weed pressure, it makes something like that extremely easy and quick to do, and assures the next harvest while something is still growing. And that process is massively helped by plant raising. So this is the kind of heartbeat of Homemaker's Garden, where we're doing a lot of propagation all through the year. I mean, even now, mid-November, although most of this actually we probably shan't use now, but I don't throw away any plants until I'm sure we don't need them. And even, you know, I was harvesting some pea shoots from these, for example, when they're still in their modules. So there's possibilities there. And then here I'm doing a little trial. You might have seen in a video already where I planted these trays just a month ago now, and of month-old plants, and I'm comparing compost. So this is homemade compost, and that's bought multi-purpose potting compost. And I'm hoping that you can see on the camera the difference, like the chervil looking quite pale there in the homemade compost, lower amount of nitrogen compared to the bought compost. Maybe not surprising. I mean, the homemade compost is not designed as potting compost. It's quite heavy as well. But I have a feeling, this is homemade compost again here, musters and the bought compost musters, you can see are quite a bit bigger in this tray. But this is not bad actually, and I have a feeling that come the spring this one might really get going a bit more. We'll see. Here we have the last sowing of the year, which is broad beans. I normally pop them in very late October or early November. So these are a couple of weeks now, or 3 weeks old, and they'll go in by early December, and that is the last planting of the year. So, it's quite late, and you can just keep going with no dig. That's one of the things I love about it the most. You haven't got to think about preparing the ground in any significant way. And it's something that's been emphasized to me by running the comparison beds here, where we have dig bed and no dig bed side by side, and we crop them the same, and they have the same amount of compost. So everything's the same except this bed I dig it once a year and put compost in the trenches. These two beds have wooden sides that we're thinking of removing as well actually, but at the moment they've been kind of demarcating the comparison, which is this year has again been not such heavy cropping on the dig bed. The dig bed has yielded 84 kilos and the no dig bed has yielded 100 already. It's going to break my record, I think, actually, for the amount of harvest in a year, because there's still quite a bit to come. As you can see, celeriac, leeks, kale, kohlrabi, fennel. We've harvested most of the fennel and a few salads. So I hope you've enjoyed this tour of homemakers in the autumn, very late autumn, almost winter. And if you want to learn more, do check out my new book, No Dig Gardening, and we're selling that, for example, off the website in conjunction with calendar, because calendar, some means or diary to have dates. A lot of this is about sowing and planting at the best time to keep your beds full all the time. No dig really helps with that, because the beds are always ready as soon as or even before you've finished a harvest. And I'll finally finish by just saying a big thank you to all our members who've joined already. You can join my channel with the button at the top of the page here, and you pay a subscription every month, and that mostly we're using that for bursaries to help train people in no dig and discover more about this wonderful way of growing.